man. Sorry about that.
Anybody visiting us today?
No,
No.
no one yet. All right, good job.
We are,
Mhm.
okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 15th meeting of the Baltimore County Administrative Charging Committee. This is May the 3rd, 2024 at 12 p.m. And the first thing we will do is do roll call, starting with me, Joan Harris,
Sharon Connect.
Dawn DeShawn Fewer,
Christopher Suing.
and the next item will be to approve the minutes from the April 12, 2024 meeting. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes?
Yes, be it so moved that the Baltimore County Administrative Charges Committee hereby adopts the April 12, 2024 meeting minutes as presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And it is passed. And we have just a couple of things on new business today. We have Major Gorman visiting with us today. We invited him because we had various questions that would come up during our deliberations and our meetings, and we thought it would be nice to have him address them with us here in our meeting. We may also have some things, because we asked everybody to just come prepared today in case they had something additional. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And is this Lieutenant
This is Captain Cross.
Captain Cross? That's right. I'm sorry. I first met you. You were.
He was.
Thanks for coming. And so Henry was able to forward to you some of the items that we had talked about.
Yes.
I can just go through them. One thing we had often thought about when we were meeting was what happened to some of the cases that we had, recommended certain adjudications on, and whether or not we would be able to be notified of what happens to those, whether they're accepted, whether they are appealed, and then if it goes through the trial board process, what happened to trial board, because we think it's important that we know so that we understand how things get adjudicated at the end of the line. We want to certainly be consistent in our recommendation as well.
Certainly. So as we get further into this year, as we talked about before, how cases, as you are well aware, have a SOL, the statute of limitations going in that year and a day. And so as we get closer to the start date, which was July 1 of last year for the everyone below the rank of captain, then we'll start to see more and more of these be almost all that we deal with. But as far as the cases that have come here and then returned, for the first couple batches, I kept going to the chief's office like, hey, here's all the recommended discipline. You have 15 days. Would you like to raise any of these? And his perspective was very much no. He unless it was an anomaly case, he very much respected and wanted to maintain what this group had assigned. Certainly, some of the cases that we've sent over, the department has recommended discipline, and this group has found that not to be the case. So certainly, nobody who is on the receiving end of that is going to appeal that decision, right? I mean, that's good and for them, and so all those have stood. There's been a few that have come back where the department has not recommended discipline, and this group has. And I know of two cases that are pending trial board now. One is next week actually, and that'll be the first touch. I know there's some communication about how can we learn from those or see what the outcomes are. Certainly, the trial boards themselves are they're broadcast actually into the building, into the public arena of the public safety building, so they can be watched in real time. And I realize that everybody in here has a job of some other sort, and that's probably not going to be where you spend your time next week. But we can certainly get the synopsis of things once they're completed, and then get them back to this group through Henry.
Sure.
Are those recorded, the trial boards?
They're not for public dissemination.
Okay, so it's live.
Is there any way for us to get like a link to access the live stream or no?
So it isn't live streamed. It's they basically put a camera in the room and a TV in the lobby.
Okay,
So it's not even like it goes through the internet.
okay.
So that met the requirement that the department had to have a public access to them, but we also recognize that it's a secure facility, and then have people come in and testify in this group. So that met So oftentimes you'll see people who are somewhat related to, or even members of the media will come and sit in that public hearing area. But yes, that'd be an easy way for us to, and we can certainly converse on those things if that's something inappropriate at a later time that we want to, how did this one shake out, or what were the sticking points, and this will be the first time that we've had the new trial board set up as well. So the administrative law judge, I know they met with our legal section just recently and got introduced to the rules or the procedures as we have set up in the technology for the trial board room. And then of course an officer of similar or of the same rank, and then the member from the community will make up the panel this time. So if that answers your question.
It does, it's great. And we're gonna keep in touch with Henry on that end,
Sure.
because he'll know when those trial boards are coming up.
And Henry, that's something you want to see. So.
Sure.
So we have also just started doing those, the crash cases.
Yes.
And sometimes we get a lot of them. And
Yes.
sometimes it's a bit more of a steady pace. And, but it's interesting when we look at them and we discuss them and we see the investigation, we find that there's recommendations on whether something is deemed minor or major in terms of an accident, and some things that are deemed preventable and not preventable. So we were wondering, what is it that the committee, the DART committee, uses to determine whether something is minor or major? And we're only asking because sometimes we're
No,
trying to
it's-
figure it out, because there will be minor property damage, no personal injuries, and it didn't look like it should be deemed major, but it is. It was
Yeah.
deemed major by the department. So we're curious about how those are.
So back to your opening comment there, we too, internal affairs, receive these in large batches at unexpected times. In fact, the group that the DARC, the DARC, they meet today. I think it was this morning, and so I anticipate next week I will get an envelope
Perfect.
full of these, and then my shop will begin to triage them, put them in the case format for you all to see, and then it'll be sent over. So that group only meets once a month as well.
Okay.
And so there can be times where they meet more than once, and there be some months where they don't meet. And I think the original batch that came this way was so large because everybody recognized the rule change that happened July 1, and procedure had to be put in place to match it. So that's just so that you can understand we share your pain as well when that arrives.
Nobody said it was painful.
Oh, I will say it. But in driving and went down, I'm like, oh my, here we go. And so I have some folks that just stay with that. But your question is good, major versus minor. I met with the commander for the DARC, and they brought one of the safety officer, one of the panel members as well. And they explained how they get to their decisions. They take all the crash and damage reports that have happened during that time, and there's approximately 500 a year that the department handles. You're not going to see that many. I'm not going to see that many. And I think that was one of the questions, how come we only see preventable at faults? And that's because those are the only ones that fall into the discipline category. Other than that, we don't have an administrative violation. And in reality, when we back up more than a year ago, they weren't disciplined at all unless they hit a higher threshold. But we recognize this is the state's discipline matrix, and it's on there now, and so every jurisdiction is following this. And on there, to your point, it says that the agency can apply major or minor. They can apply a dollar amount to it. So I'll throw that on the table first. There's an approximate value of $3,000. It helps gives them an idea on major versus minor, but it's on a continuum. So we could have a really old police car that has no specialized equipment in it, that gets $3,000 worth of damage, and that could be very significant. Or vice versa, we could have a very specialized police vehicle that has very expensive equipment in it that has a very minor accident, and yet the dollar amount will be high. So we don't use that as a holistic number. It's on a continuum, and we also recognize that over time values will change. And so if somebody's disciplined on what a $3,000 accident looks like today, 5 years from now, $3,000 may be a fraction of that, right? So they felt like a continuum was a more fair perspective, and that's what they've held to over the years. Regardless, it also includes things like injuries, other factors like I said, the vehicle itself, the year, the mileage of the car. Speed is a factor for them, so they look at that, whether it's through the body camera or if the official crash investigation was done and they have the data from the accident, that can be used, the body camera. The commander pointed out that our police vehicles now are SUVs, they're Ford Explorer platform. So that it sits up a little bit higher. They've had 2 accidents in the past year where the police vehicle was struck on the side by a civilian vehicle and the police vehicle rolled over. And so the damage on a rolled over vehicle is obviously more expensive than one that just received side damage. And that's only because the center of the gravity is a little bit higher. So he made sure he brought that forward to me. And then they also consider egregious factors, like the driving of the officer, or if there's some other factor to it. I think weather could be obviously one that's related to that too, or the lack of. And so in the totality, that's kind of how they come to their decisions on whether something is major or minor, but it's a variety of factors.
Does an officer have to do some sort of a multi-point check on the vehicle, the unit that they're about to drive before they go out on their shift?
Yes.
And does that include, what does it include? Checking lights and sirens to see if they're working and blinkers, everything, right?
Equipment check off, making sure there's not property from the prior shift still inside, evidence perhaps. Making sure all the necessary safety equipment and things are in there too, spare tire, kit, those sort of
Is that documented? Sorry, is that documented?
It is. It's kept at the precinct level. Each day, sergeant will say, you're in this car, you're in this car, you're in this car. And then you go out and check out your car, you make sure everything's good, you bring the sergeant's sheet back, and then you go on your patrol shift. So
Now, if the lights and sirens don't work, they still go out, but the shift commander's notified that they're not working,
So a
and they have
supervisor
to
would make a
compensate
decision.
somehow. Okay.
right, and depending on the role for the day, if it's patrol, I don't think they're going to put
Right.
a marked car out there that has dysfunctioning lights and siren. Active vehicle, that may be different. And certainly it doesn't account for if something were to break during the shift.
Mhm.
But I once had a car that I couldn't get them to go off. And so, I had to go, I had to drive all the way to the shop with the lights on. It's just the way it was.
Anybody have any other questions about the dark cases or the crash cases? More may come up.
Sure.
Oh, I will I will point out something that we often talk about in terms of this. I mean, the preventable category. I mean, we don't make a determination major or minor, but it's curious to us. But sometimes we will see an accident happening where it was deemed preventable, but it may seem to us that the accident was actually the fault of
Yes.
the civilian and not preventable at all by the officer,
Right.
but DARC will find it to have been preventable. And it sometimes seems as though almost every accident case is found to be preventable, where we certainly don't believe the officer was at fault, in negligence, basically, your standard sort of civil standard in negligence.
So certainly, there is preventable and non-preventable accidents. Non-preventable, this group will never see. My group doesn't see it either, right? And so of the 500 cases that they review a year, I don't know the percentage, but there are a lot that are not preventable. And then the ones that are preventable, there can be preventable not at fault as well. So it could have been prevented even though the officer wasn't at fault. But the DARC will take into account training as well, even though we may have a legal right to run through an intersection with the lights on. The training that we have says you're still supposed to stop at the intersection and clear it. Obviously, in the middle of the night, and you can clearly see that there's nobody else there, we would expect the officers to at least slow down and clear it. But there is some like totality of the incident that is considered in those things too. So everything from training to the circumstances that break involved in the actual collision would be accounted for in the preventative versus.
What do you have? We've noticed a sheet within the file on the DA cases where some sort of driver training there's a sheet about it. You kind of
Yes.
fill in and check it off, and it almost always will have, it's not mandatory.
So it'll be based on a number of things, either the egregious factor of the incident itself and or a total number of cases. So if I have 5 departmental accidents, they're all very minor. I think by number 2 or 3, they're all going to be I'll be going back to driver's training as it is. And there's different levels. There's driver's training where they respond up to the academy and they basically, show that they demonstrate the skills to operate in the parking lot and within like a small cone course, but they may have to go up to Sykesville for the driving track where the high-speed track and the one where they can make the car spin out, all that is in play too. So there's a number of factors, and that doesn't preclude any commander from saying, I think this officer would benefit from training, and send them to whatever training that is, and it could be driver's training as well. And that would be something that would not be considered discipline if the commander just did that in his own normal course of business, that it wasn't mandated by this group. Now the DARC can, send it down, here's the department's decision, this person must go to driver's training, but it can be something that's done in command.
Okay.
I just one, are you moving on from crash cases?
But let's.
I have one
let's stay
last
on.
clarification question. So if it's not preventable, but it doesn't involve a member of the public, we still won't get it?
It's not preventable.
You said we don't get anything that's not preventable.
Right.
But if it involves a member of the public, so we still don't get that?
I can clarify that.
Go ahead.
Perfect.
Yeah, because in that situation, there would be no proposed discipline, and absent a complaint,
Absent.
there wouldn't be any reason for it to go to the committee.
Okay.
And so a similar hypothetical would be every officer interaction with a member of the public doesn't go to the committee. Only ones where there's a complaint or there's the language of the statute, the whatever, any other source. If the department looks internally and says this involved a member of the public and it was a violation, we believe potentially a policy that would come to the ACC.
Okay.
But if it's an accident where it's found to be preventable, there's no complaint, there's no cause for potential discipline.
Okay. Thank you.
So we've had discussions about what is essential when an officer needs to provide their information, name, identification number to the public, whether under what circumstances. Is it because somebody asks it? Any person can just come up and address an officer and say, what is your name and what is your badge number? And then sometimes we'll see instances where that may be part of a complaint and the officer is there with them for quite some time, says the name, the badge, the ID number is there, but maybe they didn't say that number. And so sometimes we get a little, we just wanted some clarification around that, and specifically around what policy says you have to provide it and under what circumstances.
So the policy itself doesn't drill down into every scenario that we could invent. It says that if asked, the departmental member will provide. It doesn't mean that I have to ensure that you can read it, or that I have to verbally say it, or that I have to say it every time you ask, if you ask multiple times. It doesn't say that I have to stop my police activity in order to give it to you at that point either. It does need to be provided, whether it's in writing or in person. There are some legal standards, search warrants, I think traffic stops, where the officer has to identify themselves or be identifiable, have their name, their badge, their ID number displayed. And so, those things that can be referred to in those instances as well. I think by policy, at least on a traffic stop, the officer is trained to say, I'm Officer so-and-so, I've stopped you because of this, here's my ID number, you're being audio-visually recorded, right, because of the body cam. But in a generic, if we were both walking down the street and I was in uniform, hi, officer, I'd like to know your name and ID number. I could refer to it like, my name is Officer Gorman, here's my ID number, and it could be done like that, or it could be referred to. Now, if you caught me in a police activity, I'm making an arrest, I'm in the middle of an investigation or something, then we as internal affairs would look at that in the totality of everything from the circumstances of the case and to what was provided. If Captain Cross provided my information to someone, we wouldn't view that as now I'm required to do the same thing. So if someone is able to to learn what my identity is when asked because of my role in the police department, then, that would be met in that intervention. So,
Because the way we read the disciplinary matrix, I mean, it's a violation B, that's pretty serious if you've provided a name, but you haven't provided an ID number.
right,
That seems to be a very harsh penalty for something that's right there and it's identifiable, or you may be even filming an officer.
true.
And they said it, maybe they didn't provide the ID number, but you have it on your.
Right, and so in the totality there, what is the spirit being met? Or if I'm declining to tell you at all who I am, I think that's kind of the nature of what we owe to the public to be able to say, yes, I'm a law enforcement officer, whether it's a uniform or not, and here's my name and identification number. But if any parts of those can be ascertained within reason, I think we would, at least from my shop, we would probably ascertain that was not a sustained violation.
Are officers trained to provide name and ID numbers when asked?
So a lot of times the public will call them badge numbers. I want your badge number. And really they don't. My badge has a number on the back. I think it's 10. And that's not my ID number. If you were to look up badge number 10, I think there's probably a number 10 for every rank because your badge is not different. So what they really mean, although they don't understand, is your identification number. What is your unique identifier? But yes, they're trained when they're asked to provide those things. So if somebody asks for your name and your badge number, we would expect them to give their ID number, not badge number. Right? The badge is a piece of property that has a serial number back in it. That's not what it really is.
Do you have any other follow-up on that one?
Yeah.
Oh, we had, sometimes when we view a case differently than what the department has recommended, we would be prepared to go forward with the discipline at that point, but we had not been provided with the necessary sort of part 2 of the case that we would have to review. So we wanted to find out just a bit more information about the process so that we can consider aggravating and mitigating in cases where we may differ. I know that just means if we push it off to the next meeting, we prefer to get it done if we could, because it's better for everybody if we can get it concluded at that time. So we did want to have a discussion.
So I can explain that. This aggravating and mitigating is a new factor relative to last July that even as a department we are adjusting. So if I can bring us back to a discussion from before, there's community complaints, and that's what comes to this group. There's a whole other half of the house for administrative complaints that I deal with in my division as well, and those are still relatively decided in the old-fashioned, where if I get a complaint that somebody, an officer from a station did something that does not involve a member of the public, it's an administrative violation, and I believe that it occurred, I would call that commander, like, hey, we have this. And that commander would either agree or not. They can come read the case. If it's a full investigation, they can watch the body camera too. But I can say, hey, what do you know about this person relative to this violation? Let's just say it's discourtesy. And like, yeah, you know what I do? I get a lot of complaints about this person. Or, I get a lot of compliments from this person too, about this person as well. Things that internal affairs wouldn't know. That we can have that conversation in a one-to-one setting. And then I could say, all right, well, given those factors, and he has no prior discourteous sustained cases, then I would recommend this for discipline. And the commander can say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't, and they would have the same matrix that we all look at. And if there's aggravated or mitigated, it can slide on that scale, and then we would come to an agreement, and then that would be the discipline that's offered. And from there forward, it's the same as your process. They can elect a trial board if they don't like that. But that's how it would happen in those things. With aggravating and mitigating now, for ACC purposes, I don't have all that information at the time we send the case. So in belief that we've done the complete investigation and that we believe in the recommendation that's given, and certainly we respect the difference of opinion, but we believe that sending these over, we have not gone ahead and collected that. When you send something back saying we would like aggravated mitigating for this case, I then reach out to the commander and say, can you, or the assistant commander for the station, dig through the personnel file, find anything aggravating, mitigating related to discourtesy. And they would do so. And they would look through their old ratings. I think they've sent some ratings over here as mitigating factors actually before. But the same could be true for aggravating. He's like, yeah, you know what, I've had 3 people come to the lobby in the past week to say this officer has been discourteous. There would be no way that I would know that if it didn't make its way to the internal affairs report. So that is important. We also give the employee a right to, they're not going to give us aggravating, right? They're not going to tell us worse things about themselves, but they may have mitigating factors that we don't know, and we would ask them to submit. And so all that is compiled. I give the precinct commanders 1 week to respond to that. So when I get the request from Henry, we turn around and I give it to the commanders, say within a week, I need aggravated and mitigated. And likewise, the things I do know in internal affairs, the department has formalized a lot of processes to bring compliments all to internal affairs now. Before we used to only deal with really the negative aspects, but we now house compliments that the public can put through in off the dashboard or off the website as well. So a commander may not ever see it. Or they come through the chief's office, or they come through another departmental member. Hey, officer so and so did me well on this, and they write it down and send it. All those things compile, and so then we compile all that data and put it on the shared drive for your use. So if that helps you understand our side as well, and the reason for the time delay. And so, recognizing that you have a monthly meeting, I request that it gets returned within a week so that I'm not chasing it 3 weeks from now, and that also I have it back into the file so that it can be used by the school.
Yeah, that time frame is really good, because sometimes if we're unable to conclude our business, like at this meeting, we'll
Right.
try to schedule one before the next scheduled meeting and add that so that we can
So
conclude
some
that.
factors in
agreement.
there would maybe vacation schedule, right? Like
Right.
if you ask me for something today and I reach out to the precinct and it's 2 weeks vacation, I may not have that one in 1 week, but there's exceptions to the rules, but by and large, within a week of this year.
Oh, this is just sort of like in the weeds a little bit, but when we read the reports of investigation, sometimes they're prepared fully by your folks, and then sometimes they're prepared by the command of the precinct. And there's differences between those two. A lot of times, and keep in mind that we're looking at things on a laptop. We can't print them. We can't do anything. We're stuck with what we have, with the technology that we have, but at least we have that. I mean, some committees don't even have the ability to do that. So when we go to draft our opinions, we have to include a lot of information. And when we are writing notes of our reviews, sometimes we have to dig and look. And I mean, even for the date of the incident, it's not unusual for us to have to go actually look through body worn camera footage to look at the date. Oh, that's when it must have happened. Instead of having it, you wouldn't think that it wouldn't be there, but trust me when I tell you, a lot of times the date of incident, date of the complaint are not that discernible to us without further investigation, where it should just be there. When a report summarizes, say, a 911 call, and it'll just say 911 call, but it won't tell us when did it come through, date, time of the 911 call. It just says 911 call. So these are just sort of nitpicky things that will kind of get under my skin personally, but those
And
just.
it felt like the date and time for the 911 call had
Yeah, I
relevance.
think that's usually important,
Okay.
especially sometimes you have more than one 911 call going in, and then you have like an officer reporting and with dispatch from a 911 call. What was the call for? We won't know. We just are told that it happened. So these are the things that we think about.
So aside from the date, time of the 911 call, is clarity on what it was for? 'Cause
Yeah,
I think
usually.
you're right on with the way information does come in. It'll come into the 911 center. There's something wrong at my neighbor's house, right? And so, all right, car start for this. we're not sure, unknown trouble at the neighbor's house. And so the cars start, and then other calls come in, other neighbors are calling in, and then an officer's on scene and he's feeding the dispatcher information as well. And that whole jumbled text block with all these crazy abbreviations and CLR, OFC, caller officer, and it's just like one paragraph with no spaces. And so I'm sure, I know you've seen them in the archives. That's where that comes from. So the dispatcher, the call taker, they're just typing as fast as they can to get that information in. And so to your point, there'll be overlapping calls, overlapping sources of information. If we need to sharpen up on maybe get sure the date of incident, date of complaint, especially for the precinct level or the command level investigations.
A lot of times, that's sort of where there might be some deficiencies. But just sort of those little details that are, I don't think they recognize that it's that important because they're telling a story, and for us, we really are, we go through notes, we do timeline, when you have to really, when we deliberate, we're trying to get all of that information correct. So any other things that you can think of in terms of those reports that we can?
Nothing we haven't gone over already.
Because we did have that issue with the body worn camera being, inputted incorrectly. There was a different officer that it was, remember that one where the officer was, it was a different body worn camera, but it was, I don't know if it was labeled incorrectly and it was for a different.
Yeah.
It's something like that. So there can be mistakes like that.
There can be.
But then, it takes us, we're like, oh, wait a minute, this is a mistake. And but we've already spent a lot of time trying to figure out, oh, this can't be a mistake. And then it turns out it is. What other things can you all think of?
Well, I'd like to know when an officer has to do a collision report and when they don't.
So there is it's in the policy, but the loose version is if a vehicle collision has injuries or the vehicles are not drivable, then a report is required. Now there can be other circumstances. If you hit a school bus, regardless of injuries, there needs to be a report. A government vehicle will be the same thing. A report is required.
I'm thinking about the
Mhm.
farm
Yep.
equipment. We have one with farm equipment.
Farm equipment.
Yeah, and we were wondering whether that was supposed to have a report or not supposed to have a report.
Yeah. So if there's
Somebody was an accident between farm equipment and a car or truck.
So if the vehicles were not drivable, and there could be some other circumstances too. We could have the most minor fender benders, and then and they find out that I'm one of the drivers and I'm wanted. Right now, this vehicle that I was driving has no driver. We're going to need some sort of documentation showing what happened to this car, but I can't just leave it here in the street, right? So there can be other factors too, but generally speaking, with a collision, hit and run, that's true. Hit and run's really be documented.
Okay, is there anything we could ask for that you can't send us? If we ask for somebody's file or information on a certain officer, can you say, we're not going to send you that, or that's not relevant, or,
Like for an investigation,
yeah.
like a completed investigation.
Like aggravating and mitigate if we ask
Yeah.
for their file to determine discipline.
Oh, for discipline.
Like if they had that
So,
issue
yeah,
before.
that's a good question. I think Henry and I have talked this one through, but if I can go back to the other half of the department, violations that I handle. So in a precinct for an administrative issue that doesn't touch a member of the department, the member of the public, we identify, yes, such and such violation happened. It's agreed, it's investigated, whatever. We get to the point where we now discuss discipline. I would then call the commander and say, Officer so-and-so did such and such. You can come read the report, just like this body does. They would come read the report. After the report is read, then they meet with me. And the commander meets with me and I say, Officer so-and-so did such and such. And here is Officer so-and-so's prior record for related things. I don't show them their whole IA history. I don't show them non-sustained cases. Outside the chief and Eric and I don't know that anybody in the document sees anything all inclusively like that. And it's only because we're the custodian of the records that we see it. And so, when decisions are made on this discipline, it's only related to the things that are relevant. So just because an officer had 10 discourtesies, but now is charged with a matter of not investigating something correctly, the discourtesy items, they're not, we won't deny that they're there, but they're not related to the case that was being investigated. So we would only show the commander the related things that were similar to the element. So yes, that. Yeah, certainly if there needed to be more investigation for an investigative element, we would do that. And if they're supporting, so we send you the report of our of investigation, and we send you body camera. But sometimes there's a litany of other documents that we have that you could definitely see if you needed to or wanted to, like a verbatim, let's just say there's a long interview, and then I have the secretary lady type the whole thing, and it's an hour's worth of an interview, and I would pick it all up. It ends up getting summarized in the RFI. If you wanted to see that verbatim, we could certainly show that. So I didn't want you to think that there were elements of the investigation that couldn't be seen. But to explain the discipline process, even though it exists in the police department, I think the standard, to be fair, would be the same here.
How far up in rank does the FOP represent?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So lieutenant and below
Lieutenant and below?
are members of the union. So the union FOP advocates for their pay scale and for their benefits, and they provide their dues provide for attorneys. Like when an officer comes in and is represented by an attorney, I'm sure you've seen their names in there. That attorney, generally, no, the officer doesn't have to use them. It's provided by the union. From captain and up, we can maintain our membership, if you will, but we don't enjoy all the same bargaining benefits or anything like that. So, if a command member doesn't want to be a part of it, they don't have to, and they don't work in for pay or whatever. And if they pay their they pay dues, then they would have the same.
No.
Yes.
The body worn camera, I understand it has to be on when they're answering a call. But is there any time where they can meet with the public or have an interaction with the public that it doesn't have to be on?
Yeah, so not every call needs it. Investigation or enforcement are the big hurdles. And so, or potentially confrontational. Those are the ones that see the trip.
Investigation or,
Investigation,
yeah,
enforcement,
enforcement.
or potentially confrontational. And there are a couple others that are byproducts of it, and there's some don'ts, right? If I'm doing strip search, or someone is talking about if we're like in a sex crimes investigation, like generally those things are not reported. Or even if a member of the public comes up and says, I don't want to be reported, that can be considered. That doesn't mean the officer still has some discretion in that case, but so.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we know there's a little gray area because you have to interpret what you think is potentially,
Sure.
Something that could be confrontational, or maybe it starts out perfectly fine and then it turns confrontational. It can turn very quickly. So we recognize that there's going to be gray area and opportunity for them to exercise their own discretion. We do our best with those when we look at it.
We do too.
Yeah.
It's not easy. The policy has been hard, and even some of the state mandates for those sort of things have made it, more complicated. There's a new version of the policy that's going to come out soon. It's in review right now, and it's going to further help define some of these things. Based on, I think the state legislature said by 2025, all police officers have to have body cameras. So if you look at Eric and I, we're not in uniform. Right now, we're not in investigative or enforcement capacity. We need to wear them. We need to have them available in our vehicles or something, but in this setting, it would not be appropriate, right? So there's just so many things that happen that can't be line itemed in a policy.
Well, just an observation. And that is that, the body worn camera, when it's on, it almost always, these things that we see, it gets the officers out of trouble.
Yeah, we can say it's
Great.
And I know that some officers may be hesitant, but I would imagine the new, your new recruits who have only come in
That's actually
under
a point.
that, the life has been body worn camera.
When we came on, nobody could have thought that you could have had a camera like that. Like, remember camcorders were huge, and now everything's so small. But we've gotten to the point where I believe everybody in the agency understands its importance and its value. In the prior assignment, I had the tactical team, and they petitioned me for a second one. They each wanted a second one. They wanted one they could keep on their ballistic raid helmet, and they wanted another one that they could wear on their vest, because sometimes they jumped down on traffic stop or something, and they didn't want to be without it. It was that.
Yeah.
And
Oh, and we had an opportunity in one of our cases to view body worn camera from Harford County. Do you remember seeing that?
no,
It's unbelievably clear. It's
Just got the
wonderful.
time and date.
You guys got to check into
Display
that.
on the screen.
Because, the resolution, it's
Yeah.
excellent. And I mean, the picture quality is really very good. So
some
just
agencies don't require anything more than the box that they wear.
Mhm.
And the box, when they're driving, will get you the steering wheel, maybe the speedometer, right? And ours, the new policy has lines in it by, if you're on patrol or anything, they want the officers to wear the point of view camera. They're either attached to their glasses or their shoulder. And I realize they're not perfect, but they are better than the box. If Eric and I were to go on a search warrant this afternoon, we would be required just to wear the box one, just because of the function and the role. But we do recognize that there is differences in equipment, but, and I totally agree. It exonerates us far more than it ever gets anybody in trouble. And it's so nice to be able to say, like, when somebody calls to complain, like, I see what you're saying. The way you treated the officer was inappropriate. They responded, did what they were supposed to. And a lot of times we could turn those into public records instead.
anything more on the body worn camera, guys? I have just an observation,
Yep.
and I thought I'd share it with you. When I read reports and the IA detective or the command person who's authoring the report of their summary of an interview, or even when they're doing an interview, oftentimes a question will be asked such as this, do you recall saying that to the complainant? And then the officer will say, I don't recall saying that. That's different than, did you say that to complainant, right? Because then the officer could say, I don't recall saying that, but I would never say that. Those are words that would just never leave my mouth.
Mhm.
So, but what happens is a lot of times, a questioner, an interviewer, will get into just a frame of habit where their questions are, do you recall if this happened? Do you recall if that happened? And of course, the officer is going to say, I don't recall that. When what they really mean is, that didn't happen. So sometimes when you ask a recall question, what you're really asking is it, do you deny this happening? And sometimes it'll be followed up that way, but oftentimes what we're seeing is the officer did not recall doing that, because that's the question.
I
Did
think
you
that's an
recall?
opening line. I think it can go the other way too, where we just to introduce an incident. Do you recall being such and such place and such time? Or they're showing their
Right.
own body camera, they're showing their own report. Do you recall this incident?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that's sort of the opening for any,
Right.
do you remember this
just
thing happened?
frame
or
of
not?
reference, right?
Right,
So-
but then when you get to the specifics about something that happened, which was really at issue in the whole investigation, then sometimes the questioner, it's not clear. Because if all you have is the person saying, do you recall saying this to the complainant, some insult,
Sure.
and then the officer will answer, I don't recall that, rather than it didn't happen, or did, because that gives us
That's a
more,
good point.
yeah.
I think a lot of it may be stylistic or
Right.
culture based,
Mhm.
but written more investigation, how you feel differently.
I think if the officer or the investigator is asking or something that from the investigation that I've see, that should be the second question as opposed to the first question. Did this happen?
Right.
Well, and it's, I remember, well, does this sound like something that you would say?
Right.
So, I mean, I would agree. It's a more hoping way of.
Yes.
what they-
It's just an observation. I just wanted to bring that to
I
you.
can say that they're not structured to lead in any investigation, right? They're designed just to bring forth the story and then get the facts, so.
I mean, sometimes when you ask that question, also will immediately say, not only all that happened, assure you that that didn't happen because that's not even the language that I've ever used.
Right.
So I
Anybody have anything else? We're sorry we're missing Tiffany today because she had some, interesting insight about some things as well, but we'll get her for next.
Anything else? And did you have anything else?
No, I'm done.
Okay, just one question. Are any of the complaints ever charged with perjury, especially for?
Yeah. Did you see that article? Yeah,
Some of these,
no.
I guess you could never. Not even for like the very clear fabrications.
we've had the answer, the clear answer is no.
Yes, I know what Comico County did. They charged the first 3 people who made complaints that against police officers and that exonerated, they went back and charged them. And I think it ended up going to court, and the judge was like, okay, well, it may have happened, but it doesn't reach the level of criminality. And I would say that that's the way Baltimore County just starts off, just like sex crimes victim, just like there's just some things that we're not gonna pursue false report allegation against. And morally, you may think that's wrong, may or may not agree with you, but from a department, we don't want to deter people from if there is something that's legitimately wrong. We want them to feel like, hey, I can say this. And for the people who are on the extreme, like I'm going to go fabricate the story against the officer, shame on them. But for those who are in the middle, who are like, look, I don't know, but this doesn't feel right to me, and we don't want them to feel like in doing so, they're then going to have a repercussion on themselves. So now there are people who are habitual complainers. I think we all know some of their names. And I think the phone rings in the office. I can hear the collective groan, and you're like, all right, who's going to take it today? We get that. We understand that. I think those cases sit on their merits, and we consider the source when we're doing our findings.
And the officers have expressed through their representation their frustration. I understand it's just some cases we don't want to deter anybody. Here.
We appreciate you all for coming. I know.
Thank you so much for your
One
help.
other thing I want to
Sure.
cover, if you choose
Yeah.
to do it now, and I can throw this one there.
Yeah, I mean, just knowing we're in open session, so
That's fine,
it's-
that's fine, yeah, it won't be investigative related. Just looking ahead at the SOL calendar, is something that's very much, Eric and I spend a lot of time making sure that we are investigating cases and being mindful of the time frame. And I know we're very conscious to be a good partner with this group as far as your time frame. You meet once a month, right? I come to work 5 days a week. And so I handle cases, Eric handles cases all the time, and we deal with them, we send them out. Your group meets once a month. And so, making sure that we meet a deadline that is both reasonable for your side and ours, so that we can, by statute, I'm supposed to, within 3 days of a completion investigation, send it to this group. But I recognize that might be 35 days from your next meeting, right? And so then we're up against this. And so I'll play in the gray some, but I really try to make sure that I have this stuff to this group within the next 30-day window when I know you're going to meet. And we try hard not to send large cases last minute. We really do. If there's something else I need polished on the investigation, I'll send it back, or I'll hold it and wait for my final approval until we get to that point. Remember, what this group sees is only about half of what we're dealing with. But the SOL calendar, I'll just share that we have the number of community complaints that we have due that have to be done in June, 1, in July, or 9, August, 6, and September 8. I'll go out that far. And now I'll just remind us all that those are when they're due. That's when the SOL. So we we strive to have them to you at least 30 days, if not more, to you, which is normally closer to 60. Because if I get it to you and you're like, I need more investigation, I need a little window that I can get that done and get it back to you and then have it. I do not want to lose a case to SOL. And so we're very conscious of that. And your timetable plus the SOL is very much a driving force in what we make our priorities. So I just wanted the opportunity, and Henry kind of opened the door last night a little bit to explain how that is. We don't hold a wheelbarrow load of stuff and like, okay, so Wednesday before, let's dump it all right now. That's really not how we work. Whether it's the crash cases, like I said, I'm expecting a boatload next week. We'll see if they arrive. And then these other cases too, as they come through, a lot of it, they'll make it through investigator, make it through supervisor, come to Eric or I, and we'll send it back. We need a couple of things adjusted, and then it comes to us again. And we do try to meet those deadlines. So I'm pleased on the numbers that I'm seeing as far as these must be done by this time frame. We will have more than that amount to you, and hopefully we will stay ahead of the clock. But recognizing that some things are out of our control, health-related issues, criminal-related cases, right, that would like in this paradigm together at some point where we have a case that is both administrative and criminal, and we get to the end of the year in a day, and we'll probably have made decisions for the criminal bill, and that's going to be a new process for us all too, I think. So we recognize our partnership with you, and we just bring that forward. And certainly, if this model isn't working, if there's something that feeding you the information in that way is causing a grievance on your side, then we'd be happy to work around it. But just
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
explaining so that we think we understand what you see, because we used to see that ourselves. You've never been on our side of the table, so we're just trying to bring forward what we have, so that you can understand how we work to get that to you.
Okay, we appreciate that. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, great.
Do we have anything from you, Henry?
Nope, I think I covered everything in the last meeting about the legislative updates and
Okay.
nothing administrative on our end.
All right, so I think the only thing that we have that left to do would be the business that we must do in closed session. So may I have a motion to enter closed session, please?
Yes, it's a move that the Baltimore County Administrative Charging Committee hereby meets in closed sessions to review investigatory files in compliance with Section 3-3-2806 of the Baltimore County Code and COMAR 12.04.09.05 D1.
Second, favor?
Aye.
Passes, and we are now in closed session. All right, good afternoon. At 3:15 p.m., we are now back into open session. The only thing that we have to do on the agenda today is just a reminder of our next meeting, which is June the 7th, 2024 at 12 p.m., room 118 of the Towson Historic Courthouse, and via WebEx. May I have a move to adjourn, please?
Yes, it's a move that the Baltimore County Administrative Charging Committee hereby adjourns until June 7, 2024 at 12 p.m., at which time it shall meet in room 118 of the Baltimore County Historic Courthouse and by WebEx.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and it is so moved. Thank you. We are closed.